The message was dated March 15, 2013. It was brief, only 3 sentences long. It was written from Richard Branson's personal email account to Jeffrey Epstein. On its surface, it appeared to be nothing more than a casual expression of affection from one wealthy businessman to another. "Onu görmenin çok güzel olduğunu düşünüyorum," Branson had written. "Ne zaman buralara gelsen görüşmeyi çok isterim. Haremini getirdiğin sürece." The palace's communications team, when reviewing the Branson, was expressing that he enjoyed Epstein's company. Branson was saying he wanted to see him. Branson was making a light joke about Epstein's associates. Nothing seemed particularly problematic about the message, certainly nothing that suggested anything inappropriate or criminal. But a forensic linguist hired by investigators to analyze the Epstein documents suggested that the message might contain hidden meaning or coded language. The word harem, ostensibly referring to Epstein's circle of associates, might have had a different significance. The phrasing, "Ne zaman buralara gelsin," literally, "whenever you come to these places," might have been code for something else. And the overall tone of the message, while appearing casual, might have been designed to convey something that would be understood by the recipient, but that would appear innocuous to anyone intercepting or analyzing the communication. The linguist's analysis suggested that the message might have been using euphemistic language to refer to young women or to Epstein's access to such women. The word harem had historical connotations related to women's quarters in Middle Eastern palaces. The phrase about "coming to these places" might have been referring to Epstein's island or to his other properties where young women were allegedly present. And Branson's expression of enthusiasm about seeing Epstein might have been motivated by interest in gaining access to the women that Epstein had access to. This interpretation was speculative. The message did not contain explicit references to anything illegal or inappropriate. But the possibility that the message contained coded language designed to be understood by the recipient while appearing innocuous to outsiders raised troubling questions about the extent to which Epstein's network had developed sophisticated communication techniques designed to obscure the true nature of their interactions. The palace's response to the revelation of potential coded language in Branson's message was to commission a comprehensive linguistic analysis of all email communications between Branson and Epstein and between Branson and other members of Epstein's network. The analysis revealed patterns that suggested deliberate obfuscation of meaning. Certain phrases appeared repeatedly. Certain words seemed to function as code words with meanings different from their literal definitions. And certain patterns of communication appeared designed to convey information that would be understood by the intended recipient, but that would appear innocent to anyone else reading the messages. One particularly striking example involved Branson using the phrase "special shipment" in multiple email exchanges with Epstein. When analyzed in context, it appeared that special shipment was code for women or girls that Epstein was providing or facilitating access to. The shipment language suggested that these women or girls were being treated as commodities, objects to be transported, delivered, and exchanged, rather than as human beings with agency and autonomy. Another coded phrase that appeared repeatedly in the communications was inventory management. In legitimate business contexts, inventory management refers to the management of physical goods or products. But in the context of Epstein's communications, inventory management appeared to be code for the management of his network of victims, keeping track of them, monitoring them, ensuring that they remain compliant and available for exploitation. The linguist's analysis also revealed that Branson appeared to have understood this coded language. His responses to Epstein's communications showed that he was interpreting the coded phrases correctly and that he was participating in the coded communication system. This suggested that Branson was not simply an innocent acquaintance of Epstein's, but someone who was aware of and complicit in the coded communication system that Epstein had apparently developed to obscure the criminal nature of his activities. The palace found itself in an extraordinarily difficult position. Richard Branson was not just any wealthy businessman. He was a global icon, someone whose brand was built on a reputation for integrity, for social responsibility, for being someone who cared about people and about making the world a better place. The revelation that Branson appeared to have participated in coded communications designed to obscure Epstein's exploitation of women would, if made public, cause severe reputational damage to Branson and would raise serious questions about his judgment and his character. Catherine, when presented with the linguistic analysis and its implications, made the decision that the palace should not attempt to suppress or minimize the findings. Instead, the palace would present them accurately and would allow external investigators and the public to draw their own conclusions about what the coded communications suggested about Branson's knowledge and complicity. This decision was controversial within palace circles. Senior advisors argued that the palace had no obligation to publicize speculation about Branson's knowledge or intentions. They argued that the linguistic analysis was inherently subjective and that reasonable people might interpret the coded phrases differently. They argued that the palace should be cautious about making allegations against a prominent global figure based on linguistic analysis that was not universally accepted by experts. But Catherine understood that institutional credibility depended on the palace's commitment to transparency and to allowing others to examine evidence and to draw their own conclusions. She made a statement saying, "The palace has access to documentary evidence that suggests possible coded communication designed to obscure illegal activity. The palace has a responsibility to make this evidence available to appropriate authorities and to the public, and to allow independent analysis of what the evidence suggests. The palace cannot serve as judge and jury regarding what conclusions should be drawn from this evidence, but the palace also cannot suppress or minimize evidence simply because the conclusions might be uncomfortable or damaging to powerful individuals." The release of the linguistic analysis triggered significant media attention and significant controversy. Branson's representatives immediately issued statements denying that he had participated in any coded communication system or that he had any knowledge of Epstein's predatory behavior. They argued that the linguistic analysis was speculative and that ordinary business communications had been misinterpreted as containing hidden meanings. They argued that Branson's use of phrases like special shipment and inventory management had been innocent references to normal business matters, not code for illegal activity. But the evidence was difficult to dismiss. The sheer frequency with which the same phrases appeared in communications between Branson and Epstein suggested that they were not accidental. The fact that Branson appeared to understand these phrases and responded appropriately suggested that he was aware of their meaning. And the context in which the phrases were used, combined with documentary evidence of Epstein's exploitation of women, suggested that the coded language was indeed designed to obscure discussion of criminal activity. The palace's commitment to transparency in releasing the linguistic analysis, despite the pressure to suppress or minimize the findings, became another example of the institution's transformation. The palace had learned, through the Epstein crisis, that institutional credibility depended on the willingness to acknowledge uncomfortable evidence and to allow others to examine it and draw their own conclusions, regardless of how damaging the conclusions might be to powerful individuals. Branson's initial response to the linguistic analysis was to hire a team of linguistic experts to challenge the palace's analysis and to argue that the coded communication interpretation was unfounded. These experts issued a detailed report arguing that the phrases in question were commonly used in business communications and that there was no objective basis for interpreting them as code for illegal activity. They argued that the palace's linguistic experts had engaged in speculative interpretation and that their conclusions were not supported by rigorous linguistic analysis. But the damage to Branson's reputation had already been done. The mere fact that his communications with Epstein had been subjected to linguistic analysis suggesting hidden meanings, even if those interpretations were disputed, created public doubt about his judgment and his knowledge of Epstein's activities. Media outlets began investigating Branson's other business dealings and his other relationships with individuals in Epstein's network. Journalists began asking questions about whether Branson had profited from his association with Epstein or from access to women that Epstein had facilitated. What emerged from this investigation was a pattern suggesting that Branson had maintained extraordinarily close ties to Epstein over a period of many years. The two men had apparently been in regular contact. They had apparently socialized together. They had apparently discussed various business matters and philanthropic initiatives. And the communications between them suggested a level of familiarity and understanding that went beyond what would be expected between casual acquaintances. One particularly striking discovery involved evidence that Branson had apparently facilitated introductions between Epstein and various wealthy individuals and business leaders. In several instances, Branson had apparently vouched for Epstein's character and credibility, apparently not understanding or not caring about the allegations that had been circulating about Epstein's behavior toward young women. Branson had, in effect, used his own credibility and his own reputation to legitimize Epstein and to facilitate his access to networks of wealth and power. The palace's response was to issue a comprehensive analysis of Branson's relationship with Epstein and to make that analysis public. The analysis documented the nature and extent of Branson's contact with Epstein, the apparent understanding between them regarding coded communications, and the ways in which Branson had apparently facilitated Epstein's access to other powerful individuals. Branson, faced with this comprehensive analysis and with the growing public controversy surrounding his relationship with Epstein, made the decision to issue a detailed public statement. In the statement, Branson acknowledged that he had maintained a close relationship with Epstein over many years. He acknowledged that he had made introductions between Epstein and other individuals. He acknowledged that he had not fully appreciated the seriousness of the allegations that had been circulating about Epstein's conduct toward young women. But Branson stopped short of acknowledging that he had participated in coded communications designed to obscure criminal activity. He maintained that his use of phrases like special shipment and inventory management had been innocent references to normal business matters. He maintained that he had not understood these phrases to be code for anything illegal or inappropriate. And he maintained that he had not knowingly facilitated Epstein's access to women or to victims. Catherine, evaluating Branson's statement, recognized that it contained elements that were both credible and incredible. It was credible that Branson had not fully appreciated the seriousness of allegations against Epstein. Many wealthy and powerful individuals had failed to do so. It was credible that he had made introductions to Epstein without fully understanding the implications of doing so. But it was less credible that Branson had not understood the meaning of phrases that appeared repeatedly in his communications with Epstein and that appeared designed to convey specific information to the recipient. Catherine made a statement noting that while Branson's acknowledgement of his relationship with Epstein and his failure to take the allegations seriously was a positive step, the evidence suggested a more extensive pattern of knowledge and complicity than Branson's statement acknowledged. She noted that the palace would not attempt to judge what conclusion should be drawn from the evidence, but that the evidence itself spoke to a troubling pattern of behavior. The controversy surrounding Branson's relationship with Epstein had significant consequences for his global business empire. Multiple corporate partners began distancing themselves from his various ventures. Investors became concerned about the reputational risks of association with Branson. And Branson himself became a symbol, in the public imagination, of how wealthy and powerful individuals could maintain relationships with predators while failing to take seriously the allegations against them. But the broader significance of the Branson case extended beyond Branson himself. The revelation that coded communication had apparently been used to obscure discussion of criminal activity raised questions about how extensively such techniques might have been used within Epstein's network more broadly. How many other communications might contain hidden meanings? How many other individuals might have been participating in coded communication systems without fully understanding what they were communicating about? The palace commissioned a comprehensive analysis of all communications in the Epstein documents to identify potential coded language or hidden meanings. The analysis revealed that coded communication appeared to have been far more extensive than initially recognized. Multiple individuals appeared to have participated in communication systems designed to obscure the true nature of various transactions and interactions. And multiple individuals appeared to have understood, at some level, that they were participating in communication systems designed to obscure illegal activity. This discovery raised uncomfortable questions about complicity and about the ways in which intelligent, powerful, and sophisticated individuals could allow themselves to become entangled in systems of deception and criminal activity. Branson was not unique in his apparent failure to acknowledge or to act on evidence of predatory behavior. Rather, he was emblematic of a broader pattern in which wealthy and powerful individuals had apparently chosen to maintain relationships with Epstein despite evidence of his criminal activities, and had apparently participated in coded communication systems designed to obscure those activities. William, reflecting on the implications of the coded communication analysis, recognized that this discovery revealed something fundamental about how elite networks functioned. These networks were not simply groups of individuals who happened to know each other. They were systems of mutual obligation, mutual benefit, and mutual protection. Individuals within these networks understood, at some level, that questioning the behavior of other members of the network or acting to expose predatory behavior would result in exclusion from the network and loss of the benefits that network membership provided. The coded communication system was a mechanism through which this system of mutual obligation and mutual protection was maintained. By communicating in code, network members could discuss illegal or predatory activities without creating explicit documentary evidence that could be used against them. By using euphemistic language and coded phrases, they could acknowledge their understanding of what was happening without creating a clear record of that understanding. And by participating in this coded communication system, they were implicitly committing themselves to maintaining the network's secrecy and to protecting other members of the network from exposure. This understanding prompted Catherine to make a significant statement about the cultural and institutional mechanisms that had enabled Epstein's network to function. She argued that the problem was not simply that individual wealthy and powerful people had made poor choices. Rather, the problem was that elite networks had developed institutional structures and communication systems designed specifically to obscure criminal activity and to protect network members from accountability. She stated, "The palace understands that the Epstein documents have revealed not just the criminal activities of one predator, but the systems and structures that enabled those activities to flourish within elite networks. These systems include coded communication, designed to obscure the true nature of transactions and interactions. These systems include mechanisms of mutual obligation that make it difficult for network members to expose wrongdoing. And these systems include cultural norms that prioritize loyalty to the network over loyalty to broader principles of justice and accountability." Catherine's analysis became the basis for comprehensive institutional reforms designed to ensure that the palace would never become a venue through which such networks could operate. New oversight mechanisms were established to monitor communications and to ensure that coded language or euphemistic communication was not being used to obscure illegal activity. New cultural norms were established that made it clear that loyalty to the institution did not supersede loyalty to justice and accountability. And new training programs were implemented to help palace staff recognize and report suspicious communication patterns or suspicious behavior. The ultimate resolution of the Branson case came not through formal legal proceedings. The evidence of his participation in coded communications, while suggestive, did not meet the threshold for criminal prosecution, but through gradual institutional and reputational consequences. Branson's business empire faced sustained challenges as partners and investors continued to distance themselves from him. His reputation, once built on a foundation of integrity and social responsibility, had been permanently damaged by the revelation of his apparent knowledge of and participation in communication systems designed to obscure Epstein's criminal activities. By 2027, Branson had largely withdrawn from active involvement in his various business ventures. He issued periodic statements maintaining his innocence of any intentional wrongdoing, but these statements did little to restore his reputation or to repair the damage that had been done. He had become, in the public imagination, emblematic of wealthy and powerful individuals who had allowed themselves to become entangled in systems of deception and criminal activity, who had apparently known at some level what was happening, but who had chosen to maintain their involvement in the network rather than to expose the predatory behavior that was occurring. For the palace, the Branson case and the broader discovery of coded communication within Epstein's network became a foundational lesson in institutional reform. The palace understood that genuine accountability required not just the investigation of individual criminal acts, but the examination of the systems and structures that had enabled those acts to occur. The palace understood that elite networks developed sophisticated mechanisms for obscuring criminal activity and for protecting network members from accountability. And the palace committed itself to ensuring that it would never again become a venue through which such networks could operate. Catherine, working with William and with external experts in organizational culture and institutional governance, developed a comprehensive framework for identifying and disrupting systems of mutual obligation and mutual protection that might enable criminal activity or predatory behavior. The framework included mechanisms for monitoring communication patterns, for identifying suspicious language or behavior, and for ensuring that individuals who reported concerns about predatory behavior would be protected and would not face retaliation or exclusion from institutional networks. The palace also committed itself to dismantling what Catherine called the architecture of complicity, the institutional and cultural structures that made it difficult for individuals to expose wrongdoing without risking exclusion from networks of wealth and power. This commitment involved a fundamental transformation of how the palace understood its relationship to loyalty and to institutional protection. The palace committed itself to a principle that loyalty to the institution could never supersede loyalty to justice and to accountability. King Charles, in his final institutional reflections, spoke about the coded communication discovery as evidence of how sophisticated and how deliberate the mechanisms of institutional protection could be. He noted that the palace's historical commitment to protecting its members had created a culture in which members of the institution had felt entitled to use institutional mechanisms to obscure wrongdoing and to protect themselves from accountability. He committed the palace to a future in which such mechanisms would be dismantled and replaced with structures that genuinely prioritized justice and accountability. The broader implications of the coded communication discovery extended far beyond the palace or beyond Branson himself. Journalists, scholars, and experts in organizational culture began examining other elite institutions and other networks of wealth and power to identify similar coded communication systems and similar mechanisms of institutional protection. Universities, corporations, and government agencies all began reviewing their communication systems and their institutional cultures to identify and address potential mechanisms through which criminal activity or predatory behavior might be obscured or protected. For Branson specifically, the discovery of his apparent participation in coded communications marked a definitive end to his role as a prominent global figure. While he retained his wealth and his business holdings, his influence and his public standing had been fundamentally diminished. He became a cautionary tale about the consequences of allowing personal relationships and network membership to supersede commitment to justice and accountability. The palace's handling of the Branson case, refusing to suppress evidence, allowing the evidence to be examined and analyzed, and making clear that the palace would not protect prominent individuals from accountability, became another example of the institution's transformation. The palace had moved away from its historical commitment to protecting powerful individuals and toward a genuine commitment to justice and accountability, regardless of the status or prominence of the individuals involved. By late 2027, the immediate controversy surrounding Branson and the coded communications discovery had faded from daily media coverage. But the institutional lessons remained. The palace had learned how elite networks functioned, how coded communication was used to obscure criminal activity, and how systems of mutual obligation and mutual protection made it difficult for individuals to expose wrongdoing. And the palace had committed itself to ensuring that it would never again become a venue through which such networks could operate. William and Catherine, as the institutional leaders responsible for guiding the palace into its future, understood that the Branson case represented both a failure and an opportunity. It represented a failure in the sense that the palace's historical commitment to protecting its members and its associates had created an environment in which individuals like Branson could maintain relationships with predators without fear of institutional consequences. But it also represented an opportunity, the opportunity to build something fundamentally different, an institution genuinely committed to justice and accountability, regardless of the power or prominence of the individuals involved. The palace that emerged from the Epstein crisis, and specifically from the revelation of coded communications and the Branson case, was an institution that had been fundamentally transformed. It was an institution that understood how elite networks functioned and how they protected themselves. It was an institution that was committed to disrupting those protective mechanisms and to ensuring that justice and accountability would supersede loyalty and institutional protection. For the broader culture, the coded communication discovery served as a reminder of how sophisticated and how deliberate the mechanisms of institutional protection could be. It served as evidence that the obscuring of criminal activity was not always crude or obvious, but could instead be accomplished through sophisticated communication systems that appeared innocent on their surface, but that conveyed specific meanings to those who understood the code. and it served as a call for greater vigilance and greater skepticism regarding the communication systems and the institutional cultures of elite institutions more broadly.